So last up, we're going to take these ideas that we've created and arrange them up there in the sort of scene arrangement section of the interface. Just before we do that, I've just added one more idea, and again I've put it on a different group D. So let me just solo that. That's just a noise that I've just picked out of the Maschine library. It's another sound, and you can hear it's got that sort of gated effect to it. So I'm just opening and closing the filter there. Just come out of pad mode, hold pattern. I've got another slight variant of that. I've just recorded in a couple of other notes, but I'm just going to stick with the slightly simpler version, which is just one held note for now. You see that's got a reverb attached to it. That's part of the Maschine sound format. It's got a reverb attached to it. So I've just had to play around with some of the parameters there, things like room size. Made that a bit smaller. Turn the mix up a little bit. And just given the reverb a little bit more of a high frequency content as well. Other things that I've done, just quickly, let's solo group C. Something to bear in mind is that when you record in automation, it is attached to that particular pattern. So what you might need to do, if you want different automation, but for the same pattern, is duplicate the pattern along a few times and then record in different automations for each of those patterns. So for example, there's the same pattern but the filter's a bit more open. There's the same pattern but the filter's a bit more closed off. And then I've also duplicated it across again and just shortened it, as I have done with the bass line as well, just so we've got that steady held note. So I've got a selection of ideas there. Let's now arrange those in the scene arrangement section at the top of the interface there. So I've not paid any attention to that just yet, but you can see as we've been playing around with these sounds, with these patterns, just take that off solo. So all four of the groups are now back in play. Yeah, we've not really considered the scene section at the top. First thing, I suppose, is how do we navigate a way around that? Well, if we hold the navigate button over here on the right-hand side, that's where we adjust the pattern section. Over here on the left-hand side, this is where we can zoom the scenes and scroll left and right. Now, when you've got loads of different patterns on the go, when it comes to arranging, it could help if you've perhaps given those patterns a bit more of a descriptive name. You can see by default up here, you just get this grey rectangular box, and that doesn't really tell you much. Only tells you the number, the pattern number. So if we go over to Group A, at the moment, you can see if I hold the pattern button, 7 corresponds with pattern 7 up here on the interface. Now what we can do is double click and type in a name for not only the patterns, you could also rename the kits, and you can rename the scenes as well. Now the one thing to remember is that a scene length is dictated by the pattern with the longest length within that scene. So you can see for the intro, as I've called it, scene 1 here at the moment, under the drums we've got pattern 7 playing. Under group B, the bass, we've got pattern 3 playing, and under group C and D we've got pattern 2 playing. Now if I just hit restart, let's take a look at the patterns that we've got going on in the intro at the moment. Now you can see, apart from the drums, they're all 2 bars long. The drum's only 1 bar long. But because the longest pattern in that scene is 2 bars long, then the scene is going to be 2 bars long. If you wanted to extend the length of that scene, then if you extend the length of one of those patterns, then the scene will become the length of that new pattern. Let me just stop this. Let's look at how we can build this track up from scratch. So what I'm going to do is right click, in line with scene 1, the intro, right click the patterns. If I hit spacebar, you see that nothing's going to happen because we've got no patterns underneath scene 1. So to program scenes, hold down the scene button, select the scene just as you would select a pattern. So we need to start at the beginning, so I'm going to select scene 1. And then for the drums, we need to select a pattern. So let's look at pattern. We'll go for pattern 1, which is just the kick drum. You can see because that kick drum's only 1 bar long, the scene at the moment is only 1 bar long. I'm also going to go over to D. I'm going to hold pattern and select the first pattern. In fact, I'll select the second pattern, which is just that held note. And you can see because that pattern's 2 bars, the scene's now 2 bars long. So all you do is hold scene, press the relevant scene, and then hold pattern and choose which pattern you want from each group for that scene. Let's move over to scene 2 now. So I'm going to hold scene, hit scene 2. It'll move over to scene 2. We've got nothing in there at the moment. So for the drums, let's go for something slightly different. Let's go for kick and snare. Group D, hold pattern. Let's go for that same pattern that we just had. This time I'm going to hold scene, press duplicate. I'm going to duplicate that scene that I've just made. But I'm going to go over to the drums, hold pattern. And then I'm going to find the pattern that's got kick, snare and hat now. Let's hold scene, duplicate that one again. This time, let me go to group D, hold down pattern, I'm going to select that first pattern. Let me just stop that. So to hear what we've got so far, if I just go back to scene 1 and press play, all it's going to do is loop round that one scene. So I could use the scene select buttons to move through the track like that. Or if you don't want to have to manually trigger each scene, what you can do is hold scene, hold the first scene that you'd like the arrangement to loop around, hold the last scene, and now if I hit restart, you'll see it will move sequentially through the scenes that we've selected by that method. Now let's move over to scene 5. So drums. Let's go for the something that's got that rim shot in. Let's add the bass now. So I just need to come out of pad mode, hold pattern. Move over to group C, hold pattern. And finally, so if I want to hear how that sort of drop occurs, let's go scene. I only need to listen to the last two scenes to see how that transition is working. So I'm going to hold pad 4, pad 5, so it'll loop between the last two scenes. And so on and so forth. Now we can also select the portion of the arrangement that we'd like to loop up by clicking and dragging with the mouse in this section here. So finally, for this short tutorial, I'm going to look at how to export this as a finished track ready to put onto a CD. So I'm going to select the portion of time that I'd like to export by clicking and dragging with the mouse, or you could use scene selection by holding the scene, tapping the first scene that you'd like to export and tapping the last scene. Exactly the same way. Then I'm going to go File, Export Audio. Now where it says region here, I'm going to select loop range, although you could just have left it as all scenes. Output, I can leave that as master. The destination folder, I'm just going to put it on the desktop. You have the option to normalize the resulting audio file, which is making it as loud as it can be without distorting, so I'm going to leave that on. And then the bit depth, if you're looking to put this onto a CD, you can leave that as 16-bit. Click export and it will go through and export that finished piece of audio, which you can then perhaps import into iTunes and burn to a CD. So obviously we've only really just scratched the surface of what Maschine is capable of. During our 4-week online course, we'll go through every element of this powerful device in a great level of detail.